Hello, my name is Amy Pacheco, and with this video, I would like to further explain some of the assessments I would use in the classroom. Some context for the first assessments. We are talking about an ELAR lesson about procedural text in a 4th grade classroom. So after I have presented the content using an anchor chart, I would do a quick 3-2-1 assessment in which students would give me 3 examples of procedural text, 2 important elements of procedural text, and 1 way in which we, the audience, use procedural text. The reason I like 3-2-1 is because it gives a clear understanding of what the students, how the students acquired that knowledge. They can give me examples. They identify, they're able to go back to the objective, they're able to identify procedural text. 2, the important elements, they understand what makes up a procedural text so that eventually they're able to write one. And they understand 1, when we use it, the function. So they can identify it, they can create it, and they understand the function behind a procedural text. From a student's perspective, the 3-2-1 is very cut and dry, very succinct. It is low stakes, and they feel that it's low stakes because it's not this long, dragged out thing. 3-2-1, and you're done. As a teacher, it gives me an assessment of how I presented the content, and it gives me an idea of how I'm going to continue the lesson. Whether I need to review some content, or if I need to provide extra linguistic support, maybe I need to provide further vocabulary support so students can be successful in that way. And it can make me plan for potentially pulling certain students to further support them, or implementing some group work to support them linguistically. For my second assessment, this would occur after students have been in stations. These are called the Red Robin charts. And the way Red Robin charts work is, if you have students working in groups or already sitting at their group tables. So each group would receive 1 question, and these are the questions I would choose. And this is if I had 4 groups in total in my class. The first group would receive the question, how do procedural texts make life easier for us? Is there any way in which they impede us? So with this question, again, I'm bringing back the concept, do they understand the functionality? And with do they impede us, that is extending the learning, maybe considering their personal life. When do you use procedural text? Is there a right time and a wrong time? Again, extension of the learning. The second group would receive the following question. What are some of the important elements found in a procedural text? Do they vary depending on the type of procedural text? Again, with the first part of the question, you're asking them to recall the information in the learning. Can they name the elements in a procedural text? But with the second part, do they vary depending on the type of procedural text? You're asking them to not only recall types of procedural text, but then compare them, because not all procedural texts look exactly the same. For example, directions on a map versus a recipe for a cake. So you're going from one end of the Bloom's taxonomy to the upper end. This is letting you know and identify which students need more support and which can be pushed further. And for you to start thinking of how will that extension and how will you pushing them further, what is it going to look like? The third group would answer the question, why is sequence important in procedural text? Can it exist without it? Again, that's a recalling of information, that importance of sequence, where you can't just start from the middle, you have to start from the beginning. And can they exist without them? It's, again, that extension of the learning. The fourth and final group would answer the question, how can you use these texts in the real world, either by creating or following them? So they're thinking of, again, the functionality, but then the function of not only you as the audience, but you as a writer. You as a writer, what can you convey? What messages and what purpose can you complete by writing a procedural text? So once each group has answered that question on an anchor chart, those anchor charts are then rotated until each group has been able to put in their own thoughts on that anchor chart paper. So while students are rotating and discussing in their groups, I'm able to assess first by rotating around and reading what they're writing, also by listening to the conversations, and then at the end I bring them back whole group and have a large whole group discussion about the questions, in which I'm able to assess the class as a whole. The reason I like this is, in particular for ELL students, they're able to practice in a low-stakes environment what they want to say, how they're going to express themselves. And then when I bring in whole group, they're maybe more confident and more likely to speak up and answer questions. This, again, gives me an idea of, do the students understand the concept, and how much more can I push them, and how can I guide them into that extended learning opportunity. And for my summative assessment, they would answer the following questions on their own sheet of paper. The reason I chose, they would be written on the board. They would be written on the board, and they would answer the following questions. What is a procedural text? What is it composed of? Again, simple. What is it? The elements of it. Why are they written? What is the purpose? Again, can they identify the purpose? And give 2 examples of procedural texts. And this I left very open-ended, because it, again, shows me which students meet the objectives, and which exceed the objective and master the objective beyond. Even though this is a summative assessment and there's a lot of points attached to it, it appears low stakes because it is more holistic, more summary of their learning. The second round of assessments, the context for those, is a fourth grade math lesson about geometric solids. And the first assessment would occur after a presentation of vocabulary, because with this specific lesson, there are 3 vocabulary words that are essential, which is edges, face, and vertices. These would be presented with TPR. Then the teacher, me, would put the 3 vocabulary words on the board, and give students 3 vocabulary words. They will, in their own words, define the vocabulary and then paste it on their respective place on the board. This gives me a good idea if students have acquired the vocabulary and require a deep enough understanding of the vocabulary to then be successful with the objective, because a big part of the objective is using geometric vocabulary. And it gives me an idea of how can I provide support, further support for ELLs. May that be maybe sentence stems, a word bank, placing the words on a word wall, or something like that. It guides my instruction and identifies students that may need support. The second summative assessment would happen after I've presented the content of how do we classify geometric solids, and then a quick demonstration of how we would, as a class, classify a cube. Students would then, on an index card, write a quick how-to manual tutorial with 3 steps, in which they, again, in their own words, explain how we classify geometric solids. This gives me, again, a good checkpoint of, do students have the skills necessary to be successful with the with the objectives that we've set, but also just to be able to complete the expectations of the lesson for moving forward. It shows me what was missing in instruction, and whether I need to go back and review concepts or review vocabulary or what have you. Because it is quick and you're giving students a chance of their own words, they're more likely to participate and share. With the summative assessment, we would have the following worksheet, which is to investigate the solid. Now, throughout the room, I would put figurines of geometric solids. Now, an important element of this summative assessment is choice. Students would get to choose, as they walk around the room, which geometric figure they are going to identify. They would provide a quick sketch, and then they are to name it and provide key attributes, which have been modeled through not only their group work, but also with their with the anchor chart that was presented. So again, the element of choice is very important, and students have that kinesthetic learning. Students are still walking around. For ELLs, they may work in partners, even though students are each turning in their own worksheet.